So I've moved along, done a nice bit of building. As you can see, this is all basically nicely come together. It's standing on its stand pretty nicely as well. But now we've got all these join lines and stuff that we need to sort out. Noticeably, you know, we have sorted out all our nacelles just here, but there is one or two little areas. I mean, I don't know well you can see this, but just here we've got this gap running down here. We've got this square hole as well that needs sorting out, as well as we do have some of the recessed panel lines. They just stop. Hopefully you can just see that they just kind of go to there and then they stop. So we've got to do some rescribing as well, but before we do rescribing we need to do filling. So getting out good old green putty again. Right, we're just going to fill those in. I'm going to sort of get this bit done first because it takes a bit longer to dry, and I want to sort of give it a bit of time to dry, so I'm going to do it first. So just getting out a spatula, pretty much anything will do. We can just get this just out of here. Right, and this big sort of square hole we got going on here, we want to sort of really sort of push that into here. This is going to be quite a big hole, so to speak, so we really want to fill this in. Right, so I'm really trying to sort of push it right into all the corners of this first, just to make sure we really sort of fill it and we ain't got no air pockets or anything like that. And then I'm just going to sort of like plaster a nice big sort of lump of this on top. Right, and we want to sort of really give that bit a nice amount of time to dry. Probably leave it 2 or 3 days, because we put so much in there. The potential for shrinkage gets higher. The more you kind of pack something, the higher the sort of the shrinkage is going to happen. So we want to make sure we leave that for a good amount of time. And while I'm at it, I may as well get this little gap here. This is going to be quite sort of nasty, so it's good to just really pack this and fill this up nicely. So we'll leave that for a good 2 to 3 days to dry before we sand it. As I say, we've already sort of tackled that on the warp nacelle, so you know, same sort of procedure going on there. Maybe put some of that Mr. Surfacer on there if need be as well. But then we're going to come into a nice little technique here, because this model is packed full of, as you can see, we've got like little gaps going on there all the way around the saucer section. There's a gap just going all the way around, little tiny gap. They're just absolutely everywhere. Now, if we was to go off and do it with the whole green putty and fill it, sand it, you know, there's all this detail that's around the areas, and it is a bit of a pain to be going off and sort of rescribing all these areas. I do find that using some plastic putty by Vallejo, really cool, nice, simple, easy technique. This model's going to need loads of it, so you're going to end up loving this technique at the end of it, because it will save you so much time. Nice and simply, we've got this nice applicator here with a nice nozzle on the end, and we can just inject this. Right, if we just run all the way along here, and we can just inject this right into that little gap just there, and just run it all the way along that join line, and then getting out a cotton wool bud, make it a little bit moist. Right, and all we do is we just run our cotton wool bud along that join line while it's still wet. Right, and there we go. It is almost as simple and as easy as that. Just make sure you clean up any messy bits that have sort of maybe got on the sides or up your model or something, just so as it's nice, simple, easy. It's gone straight into the gap. We've wiped it away, so there's nothing left but what's in the gap, and that should be good. There is a slight downside to it where I don't know if you can see, but I have done it just along this gap just here, and I can see is after your first application you might have some pockets of air bubbles sort of come up, and they sort of pop, and then you can see all these little bubbles running along there. I don't know if you're going to be able to see them, but there are some of these little pockets of air. No problem, we just plain and simply come along, and we add a second application. Run that along moist cotton wool bud, simply wipe it up, try and get rid of any sort of excess, and there we go. And if you do need to do a third application, do a third application. Right, it's so easy to do, and as I say, it's so much more less hassle than doing the green putty and then sanding away. And if you've ruined any detail, you've got to rescribe it or something like that. It's so much more easier. Now, as I say, there is a lot to go on and all around this model. Do remember, you've got to sort of also kind of look at the model as well. You've got to make sure that you know, there's those little gaps I've shown you. We've used the plastic putty, but make sure you find the areas that need green putty. I mean, at the back here, right, we do have a seam line here. That's a seam line that goes down the middle. We want that to be all nice and smooth, so we're going to be either filling, sanding these areas, but those areas where it's kind of like a join line, but you're almost kind of like, it doesn't matter if it looks like it's a recessed panel line. That's where we put the plastic putties, is areas that we don't mind that kind of looks like a recessed panel line. But if you want it to be absolutely and utterly smooth, this technique doesn't do the job. You want to be using your usual green putties, Mr. Surfaces, sanding away. So just make sure you kind of identify those areas and do them properly. Coming back to the warp nacelles, as you can see, we've got big gaps for them, and this one is also, you know, perfect for this job. We can just fill that in, maybe give it a bit more of a squeeze than usual, right, because, you know, it is a pretty damn big gap. We want to really sort of like inject a nice amount in there, and again we just drag that along, and that just gets it all nice and pucker for you. So I'm going to go around and do all that. It's going to take a fair bit of time. So moving along now, we want to do some little bit of rescribing just here, now that this is all nicely sanded and filled and everything. So for something like this, you could go off and you can use sort of like tape to guide you and everything, but I've always found that using something like a razor saw is always a good one, as long as you hold it in the right manner and follow this. Basically, we're holding it just like this, and we're using our fingers on the model, pressed against the model, and what we basically do is, where we have already a recessed panel line, right, we use that as a guide, and what we do is we don't move our hand, we actually move the model, right, and we just very lightly saw across to the next recessed panel line. Right, and we're doing this very slowly, very carefully. Right, the whole idea is that we don't move our hand. Right, we move the model, and slowly we begin to score into this, where we make a little bit of a recess with the saw. Just like so, nice and steady. And the thing is, you know, the saw doesn't make us a nice recessed panel line, but what it does, it just allows us to get a nice straight cut across. Right, so then, using the same technique of holding this, right, we can then, let's maybe bring you in a little bit closer if we can, we then do the same technique, holding it nicely, and then we just, again, very lightly, we move the model itself. Right, we're not moving our hand, we're not really moving the P cutter, we're actually moving the model, and that just gives us this nice sort of stability to get a nice straight cut, so we can get this all nice and freehand on here. Right, and there we go. We've basically just put in a nice recessed panel line that goes all the way across, rather than what we've got here is just like there's this gap where there isn't a recessed panel line, which looks a little bit off. Right, so then we'll do the second recessed panel line just there.